story begins with a memory of two kids, a girl and a boy, who seem to be friends, and the boy promises the little girl that he'll always be her family. We have our protagonist, Harutora, a teenage boy who's sleeping in class and is waken up by his friend Tuji. Going back home and eating ice cream, they both win another ice cream and they mention it must have to do with Harutora's ancestors, and then they are interrupted by their Hokuto, who gets mad at our boy because he didn't answer her call. They continue eating shaved ice, and then Tuji mentions Hokuto is there to lecture the protagonist, and she asks him if he changed his mind and decided to become an Onmyo mage. This has to do with our protagonist being part of the Tsuchimikado family, descendants of Abe and No Seam, but he isn't interested in this since he doesn't feel spiritual present, that he doesn't have the talent. He adds that someone gifted has to do the job, and Hokuto asks if he's talking about a girl who is from the head family, and he confirms that by saying she's been already named as the next head of the family, and even she's assisting to a special school in Tokyo for this reason. After this memento, the three friends talk about the firework festival, and then they say goodbye to Hokuto. Tuji and Harutora talk about how mysterious the family is, and Tuji mentions something about a Yakou. They end up their talk with Tuji saying Harutora that he does have the talent, making the boy blushed. Harutora walks through the bridge, and while he sees the beautiful view, he meets Natsume, the girl from the memory, and his friend. Since they are in summer vacation, she went there from Tokyo, but comes back in a week. They talk about how difficult it is for her to have a normal life since she's the head of the family whom our boy and his friends were talking about before. He makes her mad with a joke, and she yells at him and saying that he doesn't have to worry, that she won't change his lifestyle, and that she can take care of herself, and goes away embarrassed. The next day, Tuji and Harutora watch some news about a disaster in Shibuya in which the Onmyo Agency appeared and made an exorcism, and also a mysterious man who is one of the 12 divine generals, a state Onmyo mage first class, a really powerful man who destroyed the spirit. The two boys talk about the difficulties of being part of this group of Onmyos. Then we see Natsume with a traditional costume in a temple. At night, the festival begins. The boys meet Hokuto, and her with Harutora have a cute moment since she looks beautiful in her yukata. They spend a great time in the festival, and even once again they have a cute scene since Harutora wins a bubble blower set for her because she told him she'll kiss him. She takes the ribbon from the bubble blower set and wears it in her hair, which makes Harutora to blush and say she looks cute with it. In this moment, along with having bubble set, Hokuto is really happy. Then we see a blonde girl eating a lollipop and buying something with a credit card. We go back to the three friends, and Hokuto and Harutora have a fic because she wrote in the wooden plaque that she wishes Harutora to become an Onmyo, so she's just mad at him and runs away crying. Tuji and Harutora keep talking, and suddenly the blonde girl named Suzuka and part of one of the Onmyo families appears saying she's looking for the genius Onmyo from the Tsuchimikado family. But she thinks it's Tuji who says he isn't him, but Harutora, and she can't believe it. Suddenly, 3 trucks from the Onmyo Agency appear and make a spiritual circle around the girl because they want to capture her for betraying the family by using forbidden magic. She makes the powerful spirit Azura to appear and uses it to attack everyone with an enormous wave, and makes the spirit to hold our boy and saying he has to come with her. Hokuto appears to try to stop everything, but of course she only stays still in fear. The girl says him to tell Natsume that he'll come with her, and just to make mad at Hokuto, she kisses Harutora, making Hokuto to be stunned and ending the festival night. Cap 2. At school, Harutora and Tuji talk about Hokuto didn't talk to them since the firework festival, and also talk about the Taizan Fukun Ritual the evil Suzuka made, which is a powerful magical ability that Yakou and Onmyo from Harutora's family did before to save people from an evil spirit and also to reincarnate, and they believe Suzuka has that intention. After school, Harutora meets Natsu to talk about he decided to become an Onmyo to help her protect the Taizan Fukun altar, which is sacred, and at the same time, he wants to protect her since Suzuka is chasing her. Harutora make a joke that Suzuka is cute and fool, so maybe she'll be willing to talk, and Natsu just mad since he had her first kiss with her, and makes a scene. Harutora tries to calm her down when suddenly he feels strange and spills a talisman in the form of a wasp, which attacks Natsu and takes her power from her and ending stick. Harutora is taking her to the hospital, and Tuji calls him and saying he saw the magical agency group leaving the police station. At a moment, a wave of talismans appear, and Harutora realizes they are from Suzuka, so he wants to confront her. Tuji tries to convince Harutora not to do that, but he refuses and indicates the taxi driver to leave Natsume to the main house to rest, and he stays there. He gets closer to the corner where everything is happening and sees Suzuka being surrounded by the magical agency group and in disadvantage since she seems to be lacked in power. However, she calls another spirit, a demon soldier, by using Yakou's techniques and starts to attack the robot the agency was using to attack her. Her power is so dangerous that the agency members are holed in the air, aching then faint. In the middle of this, we see Hokuto walking alone with her umbrella and looking at the floor thinking about Harutora. We go back to Harutora, and he sees Suzuka talking to the glowing wasp and saying, "Big bother, just wait, it'll happen soon," with a sad smile. Then Harutora tries to talk to her, and she explains that she will sacrifice sacrifice herself for her brother, and when Harutora tries again to talk to her, one of the members of the agency attacks her and she angrily tries to attack our boy, and then Hokuto appears and is seriously damaged by Suzuka, and she makes a sign which liberates her from the demon, but sadly she can't make and disappears in the arms of Harutora. Suzuka leaves, but Harutora says he'll kill her the next time. He goes to meet Natsume to ask her to make him her familiar and start his duty as an Onmyo. They make a ritual with blood, and finally Harutora can see the spirits. Harutora and Natsume travel with Natsume's spiritual horse Yukake's to the world only Onmyo mages can see, and Harutora thinks in Hokuto's dream. We see Suzuka talking to what it seems to be the death body of her brother, who is also covered with talismans. Then Harutora and Natsume try to go where Suzuka is but can't make it since she has done a spiritual force field, and at the same time they're being chased by the demon soldiers. They yell at Suzuka to stop what she's doing since she's playing with the spirits and violating all the rules. Harutora and Natsume are about to be attacked by the demon, but our boy uses a self-defense sword given by Natsume, which is really powerful, and saved them. Harutora tells Natsume to fight too, but she can't because Yukake's is not used to be in fights. Suzuka is about to start the Forbidden ritual, and our protagonists receive an attack which makes Harutora to fall, but he's saved by an enormous and yellow dragon, which is the Tsuchimikado family's guardian beast, which brought by Natsume since she has a little bit of control over it. Natsume orders the dragon to defeat the enemy and mentions its name, which is Hokuto. The dragon starts to attack, but makes Harutora to fall, and he is grabbed by Natsume and Yukake's, so the dragon can make its work. While the dragon and the demon have their fierce battle, Natsume makes a blood spell over Harutora's sword to increase its power. Natsume uses Harutora's bow without the arrows to open the force field to let Harutora to enter and stop the ritual. Harutora has some difficulties to control the sword, but luckily he attacks the demon, but it isn't defeat yet. So Natsume uses the bow and a spiritual arrow, and finally they kill the demon and restrain the barrier. Suddenly, when they go to Suzuka, the demon attacks them again, proving how strong it is, but the dragon appears and saves them. Suzuka starts the ritual, and all the talismans start to fly and injure Harutora, Natsume, and Yukake's, and make them fall. Suzuka says the ritual's words and makes the glowing wasp to enter to her brother's body, making a strong spiritual magic to come from the sky, fall over her, and finally makes her big brother to wake up. Sadly, he's not her brother, as she remembered he's an evil soul who wants to kill her. Harutora uses his lower energy to try to save her, but is pointless, so he uses the cage where the family's blood is and throws it at Suzuka's brother, and an enormous explosion happens. In that moment, Harutora has a memory about Yakou talking to his servant, and then he wakes up and listens to Natsume making a ritual for the evil souls to go, and grabs Harutora to avoid him to look at the sky since his souls will be taken too. The ritual ends and everyone is saved, but sadly Suzuka's brother is dead again, and Suzuka tells Harutora to kill her since she did the same to Hokuto, but he refuses and tells her to say goodbye to her brother properly. After that, Harutora grabs Hokuto's broken talisman and asks Natsume if it can be fixed, but she says she can't. However, she realizes that maybe Hokuto is lived, since she's a familiar of them, and at that moment, Harutora remembers Hokuto's word when she said she was sorry for not telling him the truth, so everything makes sense for him. With a nostalgic smile, she says if he'll be able to see her again, and Natsume answers he sure will do it. At school, Harutora talks to Toji about what had happened, and they wonder whose familiar Hokuto is, and then Harutora says he's going to go to Tokyo. Finally, at Tokyo, Harutora thinks about Natsume's words that a familiar should always be with his master, and that he has to go to the Onmyo's prep school, and then he hears stupid Tora, and he thinks about Hokuto, who called him like that before, but it is Natsume. She went to get him, but our boy asks her why she talks like a boy and also uses manly clothes, and she says it's part of the tradition of the main house. Natsume starts to act strange, she yells too much, it's using a pink ribbon, and tries to talk to Harutora, when Tuji appears since he'll also be at Onmyo prep because he's also a spirit seer. It seems that Tuji knows why Natsume is acting like this, which makes her nervous and Harutora to be confused. Cap 4. At their new school, Harutora and Tuji start their first day, and they're surprised by how impressive the school is. A kitty receives them, and they go to the principal's office, Mrs. Miyo Kirihase, who talks to them about they'll receive some attention from everyone for being close to Natsume. Since Natsume is Yakou's reincarnation, she has always been under the eyes of everyone, and the principal expect them to get used to it. She continues talking about Yakou's life since he was the first one to brought Onmyo's magic to the war, but he made a powerful yet dangerous spell by mistake, which made produce the massive soul's disaster of all. This made everyone hate him and forget that he was a human who tried to save everyone. Mr. Miyo adds that Yakou was just a regular human, but there are people called the Yakou devotees who forgot this and put him in a pedestal, which is actually dangerous, and at the same time these people had tried to have contact with Natsume. Then a man with a wooden leg and a cane appears, and Miyo introduces him as Miss Jino Tomo, their homeroom teacher. They go together to the boys' class, and Harutora asks Mr. Jim why the principal called them Hishimaru and Kakagyoki before, and he explains that those were the names of Yakou's familiars, the ones who protect him. At class, the boys introduce themselves, but one of the students, a blonde voluptuous girl named Kyoko, who complains about his strange to receive transfer students at that time of the year, and that this may have to do with Harutora being part of the Tsuchimikado family. Natsume stands up too and said those are ridiculous accusations and says to Kyoko to apologize to him. However, she refuses and continues saying that he enrolled there because he's her familiar and she wants him to be close. They continue arguing, and finally Natsume makes Kyoko to shut up by talking about her family too, and to win the debate. At break time, the boys with Natsume talk about the situation with Kyoko, and Toji with Natsume talk to each other in an unexpected friendly way, and this surprises Harutora and asks them why are they like that. This makes Natsume stuns and be embarrassed, and she says she's only close to Harutora. Then a teacher goes to get Natsume to her special curriculum class and says gooby to the boys by encouraging them to work hard together. Then the boys talk to one of their classmates, Momo, who's having his lunch, and they ask them to help them be along with the classes. They talk to him about the Onmyo incident they had and drag them too, and he's surprised of course. They continue talking about Kyoko, who turned out to be the principal's granddaughter and the daughter of the head of the Onmyo Agency. Her family is as distinguished as Harutora's family. The only difference is that the Tsuchimikado family has a higher status historically. Back in class, Natsume yells at Harutora for failing his first exam and threatens him about improving his marks before she punishes him, and then her personal teacher went again to take her to class. At home, Harutora remembers the familiar his father gave him as a gift, but he doesn't know what to do with it, and then the star he has in his face starts to shine and a cute creature named Kan appears. She is a mixture of a little girl with ears and tail of a fox wearing a traditional clothes and explains she has the task to protect him. Harutora has an embarrassing moment with Kan, which make Natsume to punish him. The next day in class, Kyoko messes with Harutora again, which makes Kan to appear and defend him, but Kyoko's familiar appear too to battle, and then Mr. Otomo stops them and proposes a battle between the familiars. Harutora asks Otomo to give him a traditional clothes since he will fight along Kan with Kyoko's familiars. Cap 5. We see a memory Kyoko has of going to classes and talking with Natsume, and then she wakes up in the middle of the fight of familiars. Of course, Kyoko, with her familiars, win the battle without any effort, and she sees Natsume being worried for Harutora, which makes her feel sad. At class, everyone compliments Harutora for being brave in the battle, and they ask him to make Kan to appear since his classmates think she's adorable. In class, they have a tense moment with a classmate and Kan, so Harutora apologizes with him since he wants to get along with everyone. But this guy says he doesn't like Harutora, but our boy is fine with that. In a moment, Kyoko and Harutora talk about Kyoko's feelings towards Natsume, and she says Natsume forgot her and acts strange now. Suddenly, Natsume appears and starts to yell at Harutora since she thinks he's wasting his time and that they have to become Onmyo quickly. And then an enormous wave of smoke appears, and it happens to be in spirit, a Yakou's devotee, which attacks Natsume and takes her with it. Harutora tries to enter into the smoke, but he burns, and Hen Momo explains that 2 days before him and Tuji enter the school, Natsume met this spirit, and since then she's being investigated by the authorities of the school. Harutora realizes that the personal classes Natsume has been taking were actually this investigation. At that moment, Momo gives Harutora a special crozier sent by Otomo, and so our boy asks everyone to give him their powers to attack this spirit. At the same time, we see Natsume on the floor, tied up and with talismans on her body, and then the supposed magical investigator appears and shows his real evil intentions as a Yakou's devotee. Luckily, Harutora and his friends appear just in time, but the investigator, who calls himself as Hishimaru, shows his power by calling the Yakou's second protector the King of the North Star, Kakujuki. This powerful demon attacks Harutora, but he defends himself perfectly, and all of his friends help him to battle this demon. Harutora breaks the demon's mask, which shows he has a talisman in his eyes, which makes him to feel lost and weak, so Harutora grabs Natsume, takes the talismans, and finally she calls Hokuto and defeats the demon. The next day, all the students are in Harutora's room talking about the demon, and they believe it was a fake one. Suddenly, our protagonist sees some souls grabbing boxes, and it turns out to be that Natsume is moving to the boys' room. After talking with Kyoko in the stairs, Harutora has a memento with Natsume where she shows she is jealous. Finally, we see the place where the plaques with the names of the boys are, and there is one plaque missing. Cap 6. We see Harutora having a compromising moment with Natsume, and some classmates and the mothers of the girls' room set them together and get excited and even takes photos, making everything more embarrassing. Because of this, at lunchtime, everyone stares at them since Natsume was supposed to be a boy, but now everyone knows she's a girl. With Tuji, they talk about having a relaxing time that day, but he has plans, so Natsume and Harutora go out together. In the beginning in their date, they spend a good time together. But of course they have their little fights since Natsume is sensitive about everything. At some time in the afternoon, they end up in a street full of love hotels, and Harutora is surprised by this because they didn't notice that before, and Natsume feels embarrassed by this, and when our boy tries to comfort her, they heard the mothers of the girls' room who were following them, since they love their supposed love story. To escape from them, Harutora proposes Natsume to go to a hotel, and he tries to make Natsume to feel relaxed and asks her if she wants to take a shower because she got weak from the rain. But our girl takes this as a second intention. And at that moment, Kan appears and warns them that family enemies are around them, but those familiars are from Momo and Kyoko, who were brought by the mother of the girl's room to find Harutora and Natsume. Kan tells Harutora and Natsume about this and adds that Otomo is also there to find them and uses his talismans in form of crows. After this, Tuji and Natsume appear together, which surprises everyone. But what had happened is that Tuji called Harutora and he asked him for help, so they made a plan to take Natsume out of the hotel to be with Tuji. And then Harutora appeared alone too. The funny thing is that Tuji says Natsume they were in a business hotel, not a love hotel, which makes Natsume feel embarrassed. Finally, the plan goes well, but Kan appears and gives Harutora a soap from the hotel, and once again, everyone misunderstand him and believe he did something with Kan. Then we see Natsume's personal teacher being scared and remembering he talked with someone who seems to be dangerous. Then he faints and Otomo appears with a kitty, which seems to be the school's principal about some hidden stuffs. At that moment, we see a strange old man called Doman talking with another man about Harutora and his powers as an Onmyo, which apparently they are interested to. Our characters are talking about the upcoming exams and Harutora is tired for studying so much and Kan appears saying she will help him. But of course he will have problems if he do that. They continue walking and Tuji stays still in silence while looking at the sky. And Harutora asks him if there's something wrong and Tuji says no. They end their exams and once again Harutora is tired and thinks he will fail. But Natsume encourages him to do a good job in the physical exam. He practices with Kyoko and does it good, so Natsume tells him she will help with his training. At that momento, we see Tuji talking with Mio and she tells him about the exam for the students from first year, which will be a simulation of a spiritual disaster. Tuji asks why she tells him that, and Mio says that is because he knows how it feels to be in a situation like that and even has some inner problems since then. Then we see a man talking with Doman, and after they end their talk, this man calls his boss, a Renji, and sees Natsume and her friends, which call his attention since it seems he's also a Yakou's devotee. However, when he sees Tuji, he surprises them at a private bar where Otomo is talking with Taizan Anami, also known as the Fan Divine, to whom Otomo used to work with. Anami introduces Harada, a young man who is the successor of Otomo by being in the same charge as he used to be. Harada mentions the identity of Otomo, who actually is an ex-member of the 12 Divine Generals who was also known as Shadow, and this makes Otomo to look at him with distrust. Going back to school, Harutora tries to have his lunch, but Natsume interrupts him because he has to study. While Natsumi and Kan fight for Harutora, he sees Tuji backwards through the window, which seems strange to him. Going back to the bar, the three-man talk about the spiritual disaster 2 years ago in which one of the bosses, Shido Darenji, died, but the organization still exists. So Otomo asks Anami why did he call him, and he mentions that the syndicate is planning something big and new related with the character D. They contacted an ex-Onmyo mage from the Ghost Division, Chihiro Mutobe. That night we see Toji and Harutora talking in the rooftop about the exams and the spiritual powers that Tuji has and which he apparently is controlling more than before. The next day, the exam starts with all the students except Natsu, who doesn't need to do it. Suddenly, the exams gets out of control since Chihiro has made him spell with talisman ands, then Tuji falls with a strong pain in his head. The spiritual energy gets more and more dangerous, and we see an eccentric man in the middle of all these, but then Natsume interferes and saves everyone with her powers. The demon appears, Tuji faints, and the mysterious man does his entrance and makes his spell on the demon, which makes the demon to be defeated. This man talks with Natsume and introduces himself as an exorcist, and then Hokuto tries to attack him, but it can't, so Chihiro uses his spell and makes the demon to wake up again. The exorcist grabs Tuji's head and takes off his scarf, showing the demon horns he has. We see Tuji resting in a bed, injured and with talismans around his body. Then Harutora enters the room to give him some company, but suddenly Tuji starts to hit him till he faints. We go back to the moment Kagami is holding Tuji's head and he says he's a half-ogre, and that's the result from the spiritual disaster from 2 years ago. Everyone is surprised, and then Tuji wakes up and tries to attack Kagami, but he can't, and the exorcist throws him away. Then two crows appear yelling at Kagami. Since he left that the demon went away, it seems that Kagami always makes problems for them. Next, we see Zenjiro, one of the 12 Divine Generals, in his motorbike and saying to Kagami to go together to find the demon because they have to purify it. The two exorcists leave the school, and then Harutora, with the others take Tujiyo Hospital where there are other students also injured by the incident. Harutora tells his friends Tuji's story and that his father made a spell on him to seal the ogre spirit 2 years ago. While being at the hospital, Tuji had moments when he couldn't control the ogre spirit and hit Harutora many times. After this, they go to talk to Principal Mio, and she says they'll have to use Natsume's dragon to attract the demon, and of course Kyoko is against this, but Mio tells her to speak politely at school. Then she tells them that Tuji has woken up but had already left the hospital, which makes everyone worry and start to look after him. While Harutora, Kan, and Tomo are on the street looking for Tuji, we see Natsume and Kyoko talking with Zenjiro, who call them since he wants to work with them and protect them at the same time. Zenjiro tells them that he, Mr. Otomo, and another guy were classmates before and called the Three Crows, which makes the girls realize Ms. Otomo is younger than they think. Natsume is thinking who the third crow could be, and then Hirata appears, and Zenjiro says he's an investigator and will work with them too. But Natsume looks at him with distrust because of what happened with the other investigator. Then Hirata apologizes to her because of this incident, which makes Natsume being surprised. At that moment, Tuji is walking on the street and having memories of his life since he has this ogre spirit on him, and a tall blonde man passes next to him. This man is the same who saves Harutora from being in a fight with some drunk man and tells him he saw a boy with the same uniform than him, so helps our boy to have a clue where Tuji is. While the man is leaving, we see he doesn't have an arm. At the same time, Natsume, Kyoko, Zenjiro, and the other exorcists confronts the demon in form of a two-head dragon, and of the exorcist beats hit with a powerful spell. Kyoko starts to talk with Natsume about she's afraid Tuji transforms into evil spirit, but Natsume tells her that he won't do it, that it's impossible to happen. This can be confirmed since we see Harutora finding Tuji and talking to him about he's stronger than he thinks and can control the ogre spirit. Tuji transforms and tries to attack him, but he can't, and just with some punches and kind words about the love they have for each other and their friends and family, Harutora beats him and Tuji goes back to his human form. Our boy beats him once again and then leaves him on the floor and smiles with nostalgia and happiness. Going back to Natsume and the others, they see the demon from the exam appearing there too, so Natsume uses Hokuto to attract the demon to the barrier along with the demon dragon. But suddenly we see Chihiro hidden and using a talisman, which makes the demon dragon to transform in another face and leaves everyone surprised without knowing what's happening. Ep 9. The fight against the evil creatures continues, and we see the exorcists holding with their powers the spiritual barrier that has one of the demons inside. Zenjiro calls his familiar with the motorbike, and with Natsume and the crows go to find the ogre, and at the same time, Hirata takes Kyoko a little further to not be injured for all the magic happening around them. Next, we see Harutora only running to chase the demon, and then Zenjiro sends his motorbike with Natsume and the crows, and also ordering Harutora to jump over the motorbike. Kan lifts him up and he falls there and grabs Natsume by her chest for accident, making this situation funny. At that moment, we see Tuji waking up in the hospital and Mrs. Mayo being his company. She tells him he has finally controlled the ogre inside him since he decided to change his life and becoming an Onmyo mage. So for his positive feelings, he now can control and use the ogre whenever he wants, which makes Tuji surprised and encouraged him to fight. Mio borrows him Natsume's course, and then Momo appears to give him Harutora's crozier and says kind words to him about he's the same Tuji he knows, and they smile at each other. Going back to Natsume and Harutora, we see that Hokuto appears in front of them, so Harutora orders it to take him to the ogre, leaving Natsume and Kan a little bit behind. Tuji uses the power of the ogre to recharge the crozier with his power and sends it to Harutora. Our protagonist hits the ogre with it, but it isn't enough to destroy it, so Natsume makes a spell and finally they defeat the ogre. Then we see Kagami watching the scene and smiling since he thinks it's interesting, and then Otomo appears and he warns Kagami not to go to the school since he put a lot of talismans and magical berries. And when everything is tense, Zenjiro appears and the talk calms down a little bit since they make some jokes. Finally, Doman appears and tells the students to stop being common mages and to be on his side. And then it disappears, which leaves Natsume surprised and nervous. Ep 10. A new year starts, so our protagonists are in the second year, and they attend the official ceremony to welcome the first-year students. Principal Mio calls the representative of the students, which turns out to be Suzuka, which makes Natsume, Harutora, and Tuji surprised because she presents as a lovely girl, which is funny since she's the evil in person. At the ceremony, Suzuka points Harutora and says out loud she's happy to see him, and everyone asks why she says that, and Suzuka says because he was her first kiss, which makes everyone excited and to extend rumors about them dating. During class time, Suzuka goes to Harutora's classroom, which makes everyone to yell and get excited for this romantic story they supposedly have. However, Natsume hit her desk, making everyone silence, and says Harutora to go to talk to her in private. Natsume explains him that she's worried that Suzuka finds out that she's also a student there and tells everyone she's a girl, so Harutora says he will talk to her. After classes in the library, Harutora talks to Suzuka, and she mentions she's there since the Onmyo Agency decided to punish for 3 years since the disaster she made the last year, and even has a seal in her forehead which blocks her magic. Harutora mentions the incident with Hokuto and asks her if she still thinks about that, and she says no and changes the conversation by saying she'll look for him the next day at school, so Harutora can't talk about Natsume. At the next day, Suzuka starts to follow Harutora everywhere, which makes Natsume to run and escape the whole day, making her to be in funny yet stressing situations. Finally, Tuji proposes Harutora to talk to her deeply in order to stop this annoying behavior she has with him and also to help Natsume. The next day, Harutora looks for Suzuka and takes her to have a meal, which makes her surprise and everyone to fall in love of their relationship. While having their meal, Harutora brings Hokuto's issue again, which makes Suzuka to be sensitive and tell out loud why he isn't angry with her for what she did, since he's kind with her and encourages to have a new start. She feels guilty and cries, but our boy says he isn't angry since he knows Hokuto is still present, and here we learn that Hokuto was actually a familiar and not a real human. So he wants to find who is the person who managed her and also to find her. This makes Suzuka surprised and feel comforted by Harutora, and of course to not losing her strong image, she says she will manage her new life by her own, and then realizes someone is listening to their talk. She makes a spell and we see Natsume flying away, and the dumb Harutora says her name, which makes Suzuka surprised and realizing she's the priestess she saw before, which makes her feel excited of attending the school and our protagonist to be in trouble. The next day, Suzuka says hi to them again and makes a joke to Natsume with her classical evil smile that makes Harutora and Natsume to understand they'll have a difficult time at school from now on. We see Suzuka having her breakfast and reading her horoscope, which says that Pisces have as a lucky charm a tiger. At the school entrance, Suzuka is attached to Harutora as always and makes a joke with a mischievous look to Natsume about holding her heavy purse since she's a boy. Then in class, Harutora says to Natsume that he will negotiate with Suzuka about not saying anything that she's a girl. Both of them are hopeless since they can't convince her, so Suzuka puts a condition: they have to be her slaves. So the week goes on and we see Harutora and Natsume serving Suzuka as a queen, and finally at weekend they end up being a mess and tired. Both think they can rest, but Suzuka calls them to their phones. None of them answer the call, so Suzuka appears in person saying they will receive a punishment for not answering. The punishment is to meet Harutora's room, which doesn't seem so bad at first, and Suzuka is even bored because Harutora has a normal room with tigers in it, since Tora means tiger, and also makes fun of him for loving his tiger jacket so much. But then Tuji says he has interesting things in his wardrobe, which makes Suzuka excited, but Harutora begs her to leave. She feels that even more boring, so she changes the target to Natsume's room. Natsume refuses and even invokes in spirit to stop Suzuka, but she's stronger than her and finally ties Natsume and puts a talisman in her mouth. Harutora and Toji accompany Suzuka to Natsume's room, but it also seems like a normal room which also has some tigers too. However, Suzuka identifies a spell in one of the wardrobes and Toji tries to open it and he flies away because of the strong barrier. While Suzuka is using a spell to open the doors, Toji asks Harutora if he can leave to his room because he's tired of this scandalous situation. And of course he says yes, but then the poor Natsume appears sliding on the floor and begging not to open the doors. Harutora doesn't feel good by seeing her like this and calls Kan to tie her off, and after this Natsume, already angry, grabs Kan and throws her to Suzuka to stop her spell. Finally, she calls Hokuto to protect her wardrobe, but of course Hokuto doesn't fit in her room and gets stuck in the window, and everyone end up on the floor because Hokuto pushed them. Starting a new week, Harutora wakes up along Kan, who is in her physical form, which is strange in some way. Kan stays in Harutora's room since she can't go out in that form, but she can't stay still knowing Harutora is alone outside. So she wears Harutora's favorite tiger jacket and goes to the school, passing the barrier the spiritual statues have in the entrance, and they of course recognize Kan. In class and during lunchtime, Harutora, Tuji, and Natsume try to think what happened with Kan. So Tuji says his assumption is that when Natsume threw Kan to Suzuka, the collision of energies maybe caused Kan not being able to go back to her spiritual form, and they are thinking about telling Otomo about this. At the same time, Kan is following them trying to listen what they talk, but when she tries to leave the place, accidentally touches everyone's legs with her tail, which makes the whole school to scare because everyone thinks there's a tiger spirit, because the only thing everyone sees is the tiger in the jacket. Everything gets even worse since Zenjiro, the crows, and the Onmyo Agency are called by Principal Mio to find this tiger spirit, so Kam is scared because now things are out of control. Suzuka also finds this dangerous because she can have problems too, so she looks for Kan and finds her at the top of a tree. She convinced Kan to come with her and using an invisibility spell, which is a lie since Suzuka only uses Harutora's jacket to cover both of them. The crows and Zenjiro find them and he attacks them with an impressive power, and luckily they run away. But Harutora's jacket ends up burnt, making Zenjiro think he catched the spirit. Outside the school, Suzuka and Kan think they are saved now, but they meet Otomo, who says hi to them with a smile, and they smile too, but they know they are in trouble. At the end of the day, Suzuka complains with Harutora about the sermon she received, but Harutora and Kan are happy since Otomo fixed everything. Harutora says goodbye to Suzuka with a warm smile which makes Suzuka blush. And as a final scene, we see Suzuka sleeping with her lucky charm, a tiger plushie. Cap 12. We see Harutora and his class go into a special trip to the training camp near the Fuji mountain, and our boy with Natsume are excited and eating in the bus. Otomo tells them that he doesn't want to ruin the fin, but he has to remember them. It'll be difficult. At the training camp, Otomo tells everyone Suzuka will be with them too in that trip, which makes Harutora and Natsume have a bittersweet surprise. The training starts with each student preparing curry with simple familiars, and with this, to learn how to control their magic from simple tasks. Here we see that our waifu has a really strong connection with each of her familiars, till the point she can feel their pain, or when they are injured, or in this case, when they burn with fire. After a while Tsuji takes Suzuka to talk about some things, the others start to organize everything they used for the food till the mysterious girl from 3rd year appears in the camp. Haru takes the chance to ask Suzuka about it can be possible to do with the familiar the same they did with Hokuto, which she confirms it is possible. But for this is necessary to be really skillful, so to avoid everyone to notice is actually a spirit. Now going back to the other two, Tsuji decides to show her new transformations to Suzuka, who is impressed for having a hybrid in front of her eyes, but anyway she can't help him to get the information he needs, which from here we learn that the same ogre from 2 years before was C for the mastermind in charge of the attacks in Tokyo, leading to the extreme of using himself as an invocation recipient. The thing is that this was Darenji Shido, Suzuka's deceased father, and for this same reason, now the boy wants to establish a deal with her, in which he asks for her help to protect Natsume from the Yaku's devotees, the secret sect which has been behind the Tsuchimikado clan. With all this in mind, Suzuka tells him about the existence of the Syndicate, an organization which emerged from the terrorist attacks of her father and from where the actual believers of dark magic are involved. And what is more, they had extended to the personal from the agency, basically leaving them with the control of the exorcists and the information about the 12 clans. Natsume, by hearing this, decides to ask her if she is actually the reincarnation of Yakou or is just an invented story, which Suzuka answers that in that momento she thinks is true, but at the same time she isn't sure, since she isn't an expert in the topic and everything she knew about the topic was just from a report she read before to made the summer festival's ritual. Haru thinks it's a good idea to find the person who wrote the document so from that they can solve their doubts, but for his bad luck, nothing about his past life of after the manuscript is known, since after a year he retired from his service. Now nobody knows where he is. However, there is something which can give hope to our friends, and that is the Raven Coat, a legendary rope that Yakou always wore before, and as a consequence, Natsume should be able to use too if she's actually his direct reincarnation. At the end, for some reason we don't understand, Suzuka refuses to accept the deal with her mates, and for the night Otomo and the principal talk about that the plan they have to find the rope and the agency is interrupted for a heavy rumor about they have a replica and that the original one is hidden in the academy. At the same time that all this was happening, our waifu takes a shower in the hot waters since she can't sleep, and casually Suzuka and Kyoko also take a bath in the women's zone of course, since we have to remember that Natsume is a boy in the school, and the girls don't know her friend is near them. Both of them start to talk about their feelings towards Haru, till the moment gets a little bit tense because Suzuka has the memories about her actions and she regrets them, which of course makes them to be a bit shocked. The next morning, the young girl talks with Tsuji about that and tells him that she can't be in peace because of all the lies, and he advises her to talk with Haru with honesty, who at the same time was in a discussion with his mates about the past of Hokuto and everything that happened between them. For example, the fact that she's actually a familiar who is controlled by someone else. Here we are left with some doubts because Kyoko says something pretty logic about that the only one with enough skill to do something like that is Natsume. But Haru thinks she doesn't like him, and for this, it doesn't make sense that he makes an effort to keep an A on her, and even our waifu hears this and thinks she's living in a lie, leaving every hope in her pink ribbon, which has a deep past that Haru could even imagine. Cap 13. Harutora has a dream about Hokuto saying she's hurt because he kissed another girl and he's the voice she actually loves. In the dream, he pays attention to her pink ribbon and thinks about Natsume, so he wakes up being surprised and confused. The next day in class, Harutora looks at Natsume from behind and she realizes about it and turns around looking at him, and both get blushed, and Tsuji sighs by looking them acting like this. In the training ground, Otomo gives them the task to hide their spiritual power so the spiritual jellyfishes don't catch them. Of course, Harutora gets catch, and after that the class ends. At the same time, Tsuji is trying to encourage Natsume to tell Harutora about her feelings, but she's still doubting. All the friends end their day at school and go home together as always, except for Momo, who went on his own since he's sad because Miss Otomo told him he's not good enough yet to be a strong mage. Arriving at his home, he meets Harada, who tells him he wanted to find more information about an old familiar that Momo's mother invented, but Momo tells him he should go to the Witchcraft Corporation, and Harada agrees. When Hirata is leaving, we see a black talisman entering to Momo's pocket without noticing it. After this, we see a black talisman flying in the air and arriving at the Onmyo Agency, where Zenjiro with other two exorcists were entering too, and suddenly the talisman transforms in an enormous black owl, which tells them that Doman is going to take Yaku's raven coat the next day, which makes everyone surprised. At the Onmyo Agency, we see some of the divine generals: Amani, Mayaki, Miyoshi, Zenjiro, Yuji, and Kagami in a meeting talking about the black talisman and Doman. Then Hirata adds that he thinks that the Double Horns group has something to do with everything and proposes to capture Doman to enter to the inner part of the group. Then we see the agency boss, Kurahashi Genji, standing up and decides that the agency will follow Doman. After this, Zenjiro talks with Miyachi about the rumors that the raven coat that is in the agency is a fake one, and that a real one is actually in the Onmyo prep. So Miyachi adds that if that is true, then it's possible that the agency boss has done that and tells Zenjiro to pay attention to everything, even if it is risky, but encourages him to do his duties so everything will go well. At the same time, Principal Mayo is talking about this with Amani, a spiritual eagle who serves her, and says it wants to be prepared if anything happens. Amani leaves and Principal Mio calls Mr. Otomo and Miss Fujiwara. That night, Harutora thinks about Hokuto, the pink ribbon, his dream, and Natsume, who makes him blush and lay on his bed thinking about her. So he decides on talking with Natsume about if she's Hokuto, and finally solved his feelings towards her. At the same time, Natsume also decides to talk to him about her feelings, but also that she's Hokuto. The next day, Harutora and Natsume are walking together after school, and our boy brings the topic about the summer festival and asks Natsume if she wore a yukata the year before, which makes her surprised. So both look at each other, and when they were just about to say something, the little sunbow Suzu appears and Harutora introduces her to Natsume. Then we see Doman's assistant saying that Doman has started his plans. In class, Kibuji is in the middle of Harutora and Natsume and sighs again because of their behavior. Then they learn that Mr. Otomo is being replaced, and at lunchtime, all the students see some news that the Onmyo Agency is being attacked by familiars. Then Harutora feels strange and his cheek star starts to shine, and finally we see Doman arriving at the Onmyo Agency and managing the dangerous familiars. Cap 14. Doman is talking with Mio through her cat, and we learn that Mio already met Doman when she was a little girl, and most importantly, when she was the priestess who accompanied Yaku at that moment. She asks Doman why he wants the raven coat, and he explains that his familiar is the one who wants it, and he will take it at any cost. So he starts his attack, and Mio invokes Yaku's creations, Alpha and Omega, the guardians of the school. They use their power to avoid Doman entering the school. The students are evacuated to be safe, but our protagonists are getting ready to fight if necessary, and even Harutora orders Khan to bring his crozier. Then Doman talks with Harutora through one of his familiars that is in the ceiling, and Kyoko tells him he can't enter the school because of the barrier, but he surprises everyone since he activates the talisman Momo has in his pocket, so Doman breaks the barrier and enters the school with his familiars. Our protagonists are surrounded by the familiars, but they defend themselves, and then Momo feels guilty about Doman entering the school, but from Suzuka to the rest of his friends encourage him to not feel like this and to be confident to fight together, which makes Momo feels hopeful again. Then Mio appears and tells the group to go to the ceiling. So Tuji transforms with the ogre powers and hits some of the familiars to clear their way. They are on their way when the familiars continue chasing Thimen, then Natsume uses Hokuto to break the ceiling. Finally, they go to the rooftop where Principal Mio is with the heavenly altar and makes a barrier to protect Hersluf and the students. Natsume asks her what's happening, but Mio says she will tell her later since they aren't saved yet. Doman appears and breaks the barrier and even catches Hokuto with its powers. Mio tells him once again that the raven coat isn't there, and then Mr. Otomo appears with priest clothes and refers to Doman as a master, as well as Mio does. Doman talks about the previous fight they had with Otomo and saying that he lost his leg on purpose as a sign of having a rematch with him. Doman attacks, but Otomo is faster, and then breaks Suzuka's seal on her forehead and asks her and Natsume to use their powers to create a strong barrier. But Otomo has decided to liberate Hokuto, and after some attacks against Doman and a powerful spell, he releases Hokuto. Then, Otomo makes an cursed spell, which catches Doman, but he attacks Otomo back. Otomo makes a final spell which defends himself from Doman's powers and makes his appearance to change by having white hair now. Next, we learn that Doman is actually a ghost, and he offers Otomo to be on his side, but of course he refuses and makes another spell called the Yamataka spell, which exorcises Doma, but it isn't enough. Then Zenjiro appears and finishes Doman. However, Doman creates a bomb and Zenjiro and Otomo are covered by it. In the middle of this, we see Hirata talking on the phone and mentioning Otomo. As a last scene, we see Suzu sit in front of an altar talking to Taizan Fukun, and she says she's only a disciple and open doors with a great light. Days later, the protagonist explains to us the events that happened after the attack, where the most important thing is that the robe was never in the agency or the academy, confessing that Natsume's father had stolen it from him some time ago. Obviously, since the school was destroyed, all the students were transferred to another institution to continue their studies, because from this period they begin the most crucial part of their life as apprentices, the practices to be exorcists. The thing is that the whole issue of the attack and the meeting with Duman left a kind of trauma in Haru's mind, to the point that in one of his practices he tries to invoke the spell of the 100 demons, something that only professionals they know how to use it, and someone like him should better focus on learning the basics of spiritual energy. The waifu, upon hearing this, decides to come out to defend the boy, pointing out that if those experts she talks about so much had done their job well, they would not have the need to go to these extremes of being left without an academy and without teachers. Anyway, later that same day, the protagonist asks Natsume to accompany him to the old building to check the altar they saw on the terrace, since it's not only the same as the one the Tsuchimikado family had in their custody, but also is a very powerful tool for doing high-level rituals. The thing is that upon arriving, we meet Sumata Kiko, a somewhat mysterious student who even knows about the clan's forbidden and secret spells to use the divine altar, and who also reveals to us the dark past of the school. It turns out that before becoming the academy, this place was the Yakou private high school, an institution that accepted students for their level of power, leaving aside all issues of lineage or the place where they come from, setting a clear example to the director, who was selected by this same exorcist when she was just a child. With this in mind, they both decide to tell this story to Toji, who at first didn't want to fully believe the information from someone they don't even know, but he still agrees to help them, and later they meet in the library to look for some kind of record that contained information about Yakou and the founding of the school. However, even though they reviewed each and every one of the books, they were unable to find anything interesting about this subject. So they better choose to investigate the past of their teachers, finding the name of Saton Ryu, the same person who wrote the report about the decade of the exorcists and who once served as a reference for Suzuka to carry out its plans. Back home, the boys talk about the topic, and they begin to think that the only way to clear up doubts is to ask Otomo directly, since they were both part of the same generation of students. Only before arriving at the place, they run into Suzu, who as usual has that suspicious aura, which gets worse when in the same car we see a child who leaves a bad impression on more than one of the kids. Anyway, already at the hospital, the sensei talks with Chief Imami about the fight he had with Damen, and it is here where this man reveals to us that he wants to take advantage of all this commotion to dismantle the agency and publicly expose the existence of the syndicate. Well, apparently, the time has come to sign his retirement as a manager. After a while, the protagonist and his friends enter the room, where he introduces himself in a more formal way, and they talk for a while, until in one of those, the blonde begins to deduce on her own something that had her uneasy from the moment Otomo broke the seal of his powers, as it turns out that the teacher is not as innocent as he seems, but in his past he was known as the Mystical Fan, or Shadow for short, one of the exorcists who was part of the 12 clans, and on the orders of the director he became a kind of personal bodyguard for the Tsuchimikado family, focusing above all on protecting Natsume from the threats that will come in the future. Ep 16. Kagame introduces himself as the new guardian of the second-year class, and of course everyone is shocked. Kagame is not alone. A tall and blonde man called Shaver is in charge of being the observer of the students. Natsume looks at him with distrust and tells Harutora to behave in front of him. Then we see the investigation center of the Onmyo Agency, and everyone is working peacefully, and the agency members are discussing about the Double Horn Association. At school, our protagonists are having their lunch, and Harutora gets distracted by Shaver, who is staring at them, and Kyoko shares that Suzuka told her that Shaver is a dangerous familiar and they have to be careful. Then Harutora drops his sticks, so go to find Tuck more, but he meets Kagame, who wants to talk to him about the battle between Doman and Otomo. We can see that the exorcist professional Atu, whom Natsume insulted before, is listening to talk. Going back to the Onmyo Agency, suddenly the authorities and special forces appear to arrest all the investigators who actually are Yakou's devotees. An enormous group tries to escape and go to a secret place along with Makara, another member of the Onmyo Agency. They go out from here, but a battle starts with the officials causing a lot of damage in the agency. In a moment, we see Makara, who meets Hirata, and he shoots it and makes a spell on him, causing finally his death. Hirata makes a call telling to someone that everything ended, but then Amani appears saying that he already knew he was a traitor, which surprises Hirata a little bit. Hirata invokes his familiars, and this makes Amani be shocked since these familiars are the Imperial ones. Hirata attacks, but of course Amani counterattacks with his impressive powers. In a moment, Hirata seems to have everything under his control, but he decides to stop the attack to Amani. Amani asks him who he actually is, and Hirata explains that he's a Yakou devotee too, but not the same type as the other savages he saw before. He also adds that the wishes of Yakou were to create the Onmyo Prep and the Double Horn Association. Amani asks him what is the Double Horn Association, and before Hirata explains him this, he realizes what is he doing with his superior Amani and stays still. So Amani takes advantage of this and uses a spell with his fan, which makes Hirata to be defeated. In a moment, Amani notices that Harada's body starts to change and transforms in the red-haired girl, which makes Amani to be confused. Finally, at school, while Harutora is telling his friends they have to be aware of the strange things happening, the exorcist Etu appears and tells Natsume to take responsibility of what is happening with Yakou's devotees, and we see Shaver listening everything and only whispering boring, boring. Cap 17. Etu is talking with our protagonist, and suddenly Shaver attacks him with his sword, provoking a serious injury on him, which makes everyone shocked and scared. The exorcist appeared just in time to attack Shaver, and when Etu tries to stand up, Shaver uses his sword again, but this time he invokes a spell which is about to catch the protagonists. Natsume uses a barrier and Hokuto to attack him, and also the exorcists attack too, but Shaver is stronger, so Harutora tells Kyoko to use his familiars too, and the rest tell Natsume and Harutora to run and hide in another place. They go to the lunchroom, but Shaver finds them, and when he is about to attack them, their friends appear and save them. Everyone thinks everything is okay, but Shaver doesn't give up and stays strong. As Harutora doesn't defeat Shaver and Natsu is tired because Shaver hurt Hokuto, Tuji tells them to run and they go to the deposit where other students are hidden too. Harutora uses a talisman to protect them, but Shaver destroys it. They go inside a deposit where other students are hidden, and Harutora uses a talisman to protect them, but Shaver goes inside and makes Harutora to fly away, and even Natsume is attacked too, making her being injured on the floor and with her clothes destroyed. Everyone is surprised since they realize Natsume is actually a girl, and Harutora is angry at himself since he feels weak and useless, and a tear drops in his face which makes his start to shine. Then he realizes that he has to connect himself with his powers and remembers the seal Natsume made on him, and now he feels ready and powerful to fight. Now Harutora can even see where Shaver has the source of his power, which is his sword, so he tells Natsume to guide Shaver outside because he now knows how to defeat him. Outside the school, now Harutora makes the spell Otomo did before and finally exorcises Shaver. After this battle, Harutora tries to defend Natsume because of her lie about being a boy, and Kyoko looks at her and cries, telling her she's a liar, which makes Natsume feel sad. Finally, we see Amani and Mia talking with the boss, Kurahashi, about what's happening, and then Suma appears, which confuses Amani even more. Amani asks the boss what relationship they have, and he refuses to do so, and then Mio calls Amani, but he doesn't answer. Sadly, we see Amani's fan destroyed, Suma telling sorry, and Kurahashi saying they will blame Harada. Finally, both say they have to contact Natsume. Ep 18. However, the next morning our young lady has to face her own problems, and no matter how hard it turns out, she has to tolerate the looks of disappointment, starting with the most difficult one, Kyoko, with her broken illusions, since we have to remember when they met as children, they promised to be together in the future as a loving couple. Ironically, this story is not so true because when our protagonist tries to talk to her, we learn what actually happened years ago in the Tsuchimikado's house, and that her first love was a little blonde boy who with his smile and kindness won her heart. A while ago, Suzuka spends some time with her friend and help her to improve her mood, and with her characteristic sarcasm, she tells her she doesn't have to worry for someone who doesn't even be honest with the man she loves, mentioning the fact that Natsume still keeps the secret about Hokuto and her remote familiars. The good part is that the next day, everyone will have the chance to be honest and to make this clear for once and for all, since it turns out that the blonde girl thought about invite them to the first firework festival, but for her bad luck, her plans will be affected for an incident with Harutora's family and our waifu. To have a better understanding about what happened, we have to go back to the early morning of the night before, where a group of independent exorcists arrived to the Tsuchimikado's residence to arrest the clan's boss. Because of this, a strong battle starts in the whole place, where two girls fight for a while, till Miyachi, one of the divine generals who works for the agency, arrives there to make everything more interesting, which becomes even better since at the same time, Otomo has a talk with Maze, a younger version of Domen, where he confesses that after his supposed death, he decided to leave the syndicate, and now he lives his days more freely, till the point he can confess that Suzu is the disciple who sent him to find the rogue, and that her boss who gave her the tax was someone who is also involved with the agency's matters. Cap 19. The bad thing is that this boss is who sent Suma to the academy, and now Kyoko fell in a trap to guide them to Natsume and Haru, who doesn't have a clue about this mysterious girl, and they let her to enter the class without any inconvenience. After a couple of hours walking around the school and talking about life, the news about the incident in the Tsuchimikado's house, it becomes a topic of investigation, since there isn't any sign of a survivor. The reddish girl hears this and feels that it's her fault that now the guys are having a bad moment, so she decides to explain them that according to a report about the mission, the clan's boss with his disciples are safe, since they were the ones who started the fire as a containment method. Suma confesses her interest about Yaku's resurrection, and for this reason, she is the part that the devotees of the real cult, the ones who want to accomplish their king's willpower and to reach fullness, trough Natsume. Since the girl feels she can express her intentions very well, she asks again to have a face-to-face battle, which at first was equal, but everything changes when our waifu gets angry and tells she doesn't have to reach the expectations as something that she was obligated to do since her birth, and she prefers to enjoy her life instead of eyeing someone else's life. These words change something in Suma's interior self, who turned out to be the last descendant princess of her family, and for this, one of the strongest ancestral priestesses of the Exorcist decade. However, before things get a little more serious, Otomo always arrives to save the day and stops the girl's attack to make her retire and then control Haru since a while ago. And with all the incidents they had been living, her eyes mark who help him to see the spiritual torrent as causing him some problems. With this in mind, while Sensei asks Suzuka to examine Haru completely, since he believes this is an anti-natural condition, and also takes the opportunity to talk with Natsume and give her advice about how to solve things with Kyoko, literally obligating her to go to her friend to be host about her feelings and let the child's misunderstandings in the past. The problem is that the girl is so sad that an apology is not enough to repair all the damages, and she tells her she didn't even know that she actually liked her masculine version. After having a discussion for a while and cry a little bit, both talk about their real first love, who was a blonde boy with a unique charisma, who conveniently was also Natsu's first love. So yes, all this time Kyoko and her were both in love with Haru. So now they'll have to fight to see who will win his heart, but of course Natsume has to manage Hokuto's issue. And so that the truth comes out about that remote familiar, leave everything in the past and start from zero, and from that, the best one wins. While all this was happening, we go back to the harsh reality where Otomo has again a meeting with Mio, who explains in detail more about the bosses who accompanied Yakou in the Exorcist's time, mentioning mainly the name of two pioneer families, Kurahashi, which means their antecedents, and Suma, the Reddish Girls clan, which were in charge of the military part, but after their defeat, they disappeared from all the registers, or at least it looked like that, since Sensei thinks that the Cancelier has kept in touch with these group of stragglers, who are the responsible for the incidents such as the disappearance of Amami or the fire of the Tsuchimikado's house. At the end, he wasn't far from the reality because later that day, in the main office of the agency, the princess and her familiars met to talk with Genji Kurahashi, the Principal Zero's son and actual boss of the place, who not only gives them a package with a Crow Raven coat, but also starts his plan about obligating Natsume to make free the reincarnation of Yakou Tsuchimikado in the firework festival. Cap 20. To have a better understanding about what is going to happen is necessary to go back to the day that the waifu's father talked about the familiar tradition, in which she had to change her appearance like a man, and as a consequence, she took distance from Haru. The thing is that to keep an eye over the only person who gives meaning to her life, she decided to create a remote familiar inspired in a model from a magazine, creating Hokuto, the girl who will accompany our boy during his childhood till the day she sacrificed herself to save his life. Now going back to the present, we are a few hours before the festival starts, but first during the morning, Natsume goes out with Haru for a walk, to eat ice cream and to talk about his eye's issue. But his kind of date is interrupted by one of Suzu's informants who warns her about the actual situation and advises her that if she can't control what is coming, she can go to her teacher to try to do something. The problem is that we learn that in Yakou's prophecy, it was said that a son from his descendants will be his next reincarnation, and since the recent discoverment about Genji and the agency about our waifu's identity, this gets a little bit more complex, because this means that the real hair of the Tsuchimikado is hidden somewhere, or what it looks like, it seems that Suma may know who is her real target, and now the only thing left is act to wake up her powers and then prove if her theory is correct. Later that same day, already in the festival, Natsu talks to Toji about the person she saw in the morning, who is known as Kakujuki, or in other words, the legendary ogre of one arm. At the end, they don't give it much attention, since they are in a place to have fun, and they don't want to waste the opportunity to enjoy the fireworks. After a couple of hours, the whole groups meet in the dock and they start to play, eat, and basically they spend a good time surrounded by the only people they can call friends. Even the bond between Kyoko and Natsu gets stronger. At night, the light show illuminates the sky, and since the young lady is very smart, decides to go for a drinks accompanied by Haru, giving them the memento to be alone so they can talk with honesty. Is here where Natsu mentions the ima, the plaques where you can draw your wish and then hang in the temple to come true, remembering that in her form as Hokuto, she wrote in an ima, where she asked to give the opportunity to Haru to become an exorcist as her. The problem is that when the summer secret was about to go out, Suma arrives with a hostile attitude than before, and without thinking it twice, invokes the Minama's ritual, which is the key to liberate the hidden powers that Haru keeps in his interior, and that were blocked by his mother because all this time, the real Yakou's reincarnation was our Haru. But because of the cursing he received as a child, it was never possible to see he has this secret in his interior. However, Suma's plans didn't work out as she expected, since not only we see that the Raven Coat is a Parisian familiar which fights against his master to be used, but also our boy puts some resistance, since from what we can see, even when he is the original reincarnation of this exorcist, his physical body and spiritual are not so compatible with his roots, which causes an energy imbalance so immense that can cause the death. Natsume is desperate, so she goes back to the words others told her about Haru and that he is an incomplete human being. And then she realizes that the problem is from the ritual they did to become Haru her familiar, since that day she broke one of the seals that kept the cursing, and for this, what she needs to do now is to replicate the same incantation and so to destroy T resting part to save her friend's life. With this in mind, Natsume risks her own life and takes the perfect opportunity to lay in our boy's arms and for the last time recite the spell to liberate Haru from the chains who capture him in his interior. But as a consequence, now he receives another sentimental blow since once again he wasn't strong enough and couldn't protect the only person who gave meaning to his life and the only one he loved with all his heart. Cap 21. After a while, the rest of the friends lean about Natsume's death and see a broken Haru, who tries many times to revive her by using talismans and spells, but Tsuji tells her to let her go, because none of those things can make a soul that came back from the world of the dead. These three simple words make our boy to remember that there is a way to make someone to revive and is with the Taizan Fukun Ritual, the same that Suzuka used the year before. From this, we only see that Haru is getting worse, till the point he reveals against his friends to leave him alone and so he can use the spell for his friend. Things get worse when the blonde's father, or well, what's left of him, because he is now one of Suma's gloomy colossi, arrives at the scene to put a little more pressure on the moment, and in addition to revealing to us that Haru is still in its incomplete form, he also offers his services to carry out the ritual of the souls, since he is living proof that it can be carried out successfully, leaving him in a position where his knowledge of this spell is what our boy could care more. The news of Natsume's death spreads through the stars, and both Suzu and the Tsuchimikado clan find out the bad news, and things begin to turn against Tsuji and the rest of his friends, since they at the same time, just like the protagonists, they are blaming themselves for the waifu's death. The problem is that the agency took action on the matter, and now they have our boy under interrogation, and after that they will take him as a prisoner to take care of him personally, and they will put the young girl's body under the custody of the morgue. Once there, we see that Otomo entered to say his last goodbye to the student he could not protect, and without much more to say, he disappears from the room. While all this was happening, they also show us the meaning that Suzuka's father has with the Chancellor about his first contact with the reincarnation of Yakou, mentioning that for the moment, both his soul and his memories and abilities are still intact. Genji is calmed by the news, but knows that now he has more important problems, such as dealing with the head of the Tsuchimikado and Shadow, people who must have been very hard hit by the death of his little girl. However, to deal with a demon, you have to take out another demon, or at least that's what this guy thinks, since after a while he decides to call Kagami to protect his organization from any exorcist attack. This crazy man is too excited and he doesn't think twice about accepting the job. Later that same day, Tsuji takes advantage of the fact that the director left the rectorate to tell his friends that once they return home, he will infiltrate the agency to rescue Haru, since apparently he has already accepted that the only way to end with this hell is reviving Natsume through the ritual of souls, and minutes later both Kyuko, Suzuka, and Momo join the plan. In a brief moment, they show us how Otomo called his friend Master to ask him to return the favor he promised him for defeating him. Cap 22. At night, while our friends gather near the building to put their plan into action, and the sensei, along with little Demon, walk under the sewers on their way to their destination, we see that Muto escorts the protagonist to the office of the Chancellor to talk about Taizan Fukun, which from what the blonde's father explains to us is a kind of magical system that serves to manipulate souls, and from there, derivations are made to different rituals depending on what that the summoner wants to rescue, giving as an example the case of his daughter, who only knows the method of giving a living person for a person. Haru obviously knows that they are going to ask him for something in return to carry out the ritual, to which Genji tells him that he should only join their side and use his position as a descendant and future leader of the Tsuchimikado clan to eradicate the organizations that goes against your objectives. In a kind of flashback, this man tells in more detail the history of the Pacific War, a conflict in which Yakou unified all the thaumaturgic variants of Japan to the cradle of the imperial court style with the help of two great families, the Kurahashi, who were in charge of the logistics, and the Suma, who controlled the military strategy, thus assuming responsibility for the agency and the intelligence department. This union of families was mainly dedicated to researching the pillars of modern magic, and that is where our boy comes in, revealing that now that he has the long-awaited return of Yakou, they can return to resume the work that they started one day and were never able to finish. However, before reaching a final resolution, the visit of our beloved sensei and the spirit of Daomen invade the building, thus beginning the rescue plan by the academy. The first confrontation is between Master and the Crimson Devil, which actually serves as a distraction so that Otomo enters the agency without any major inconvenience and only has to take care of Kagami's nuisance. The good thing is that all this chaos and destruction in a way benefits our boys, since it opens the direct path to where Haru is, who by the way is facing the lies and deceptions that Genji tells him so that he does not reconsider. Idea of joining his troops, and that as hard as it may seem, he is slowly falling into the dark path to the point that Khan has to come out of his spiritual form to tell him that his true master would never hesitate to know what the right decision is between good and evil, because he knows that if he chooses to join the agency's side, it would be like giving his soul to the devil. The protagonist, blinded by anger, tells him that he has no choice but to ask these people for help to recover the girl who sacrificed herself to save his life, which is not entirely true, since as the little fox mentions, if it deals with the manipulation of souls, there is no one more suitable than him to carry out the Taizan Fukun, because ultimately, within it resides the power of Yakou, the exorcist who basically mastered this technique to perfection. In summary, what Khan wants to tell him is that he must take charge of Natsume's resurrection, since not only does he have enough power to invoke him, but he also has the intention and feelings necessary for this ritual to go well without need. To ask for help from outside people who will only drain the little humanity he has left. With this in mind, our boy manages to reconsider in time, and thanks to a meme breaking the seal that protected the container of the Raven's robe, things turn around and now the protagonist has a certain advantage over his enemies, which is still better when his friend shows up to lend a hand against the blonde's dad. Cap 23. To understand a little better how the cool old man managed to infiltrate the Cape Room without anyone noticing, we have to go back a couple of hours to the exact moment where Suzu visits Momo to take him to the agency. Well, she is very intelligent, and she knows that sending someone who goes completely unnoticed from the security of the place will be the key to the direction of the mission. Already in place and taking advantage of the fact that just at that moment, Dooman's attacks destabilized the entire system. Entering the restricted areas was a matter of applying a fairly simple invisibility spell to cross the magical barrier and thus be able to access the room that Memi wants and that Suzu needed to control. Once this is clarified, we can return to the present, where thanks to our blonde's tricks, the protagonist and Tuji can buy themselves some time to escape from the Chancellor's office so that the rogue can connect with its owner, and well, no matter how much one of the Gloomy Colossi tries to stop the advance of this pair, the head of the Tsuchimikado clan appears at the best moment and conjures a counterspell that nullifies their powers for a few moments, leaving everything in the hands of the boys. However, the good news does not end here, since once everyone is in a safe place, Momo confesses to Haru that if he really wants to carry out Taizan Fukun on his own, he has the support of Suzu, who he will have everything ready by the time they get Natsume and take her in front of the divine altar. It's here where all the dots connect, both the time he heard the advice of the one-armed ogre, who told him that if things get out of control, he can trust Satome, and when he was first told about the tunic, which is a tool that only the descendant of Yakou can use, but to do so you must have enough strength to be able to control it before it does so in your soul. Now clearer than ever, the protagonist sets out to implement his plan to resurrect his waifu. Koger appears on the scene to prevent forbidden magic from being used. Years ago, it ended the lives of thousands of people, and little by little it corrupts the heart of the exorcist who uses it. In the midst of all this confusion, Kyuko has a severe pain in her head that knocks her to the ground, and when she tries to wake up, she finds herself stranded on a spiritual plane, where she can not only clearly see the stars and other worlds, but also understands perfectly that the rules and what is supposedly prohibited is just an invention of humans, so that they do not go down the path of truth, confessing that in a certain part of space, Natsume's star is waiting for them to have their long-awaited reunion. Cap 24. Hearing this, Haru has no doubt that this is the right decision, so without giving the matter any further thought, he sets out to the agency to recover the young girl's body and then go to the altar where Suzu has everything prepared for carry out the ritual. Only, as expected, things were not going to be so easy for our boy, because as soon as he approaches the building, he has the bad luck to meet a Kagami even crazier than before, who in a few words wants to get all his revenge. Anger at not being able to defeat Otomo, and that he doesn't mind having to hurt the civilians or Khan, since he just wants to spill some blood. Obviously, the protagonist was not going to let him kill another of his friends, so he decides to put himself in front and get hurt very badly in order to save a little person who in the past was very important to Yakou's life. It turns out that Khan is actually a harmless version of Hishimaru, the true protector familiar of the Tsuchimikado family, which along with the one-armed ogre, because yes, apparently these two are ancient spirits who have known each other for years and who they are only freed when they feel the presence of their master. They can recover the memories of their past life and finally give them the opportunity to see themselves face to face with Genji and Suma, those responsible for Natsume's death, and who consequently are now his enemies. The redhead decides to give the young girl's body to her current king, and the only thing she tells him before leaving the room is that they will see each other again sooner than they can. In any case, Haru manages to get to the divine altar in time, where just as Suzu promised, he has everything ready to invoke the Taizan Fukun, which together with a new dawn for the lives of these boys can finally restore the smile to the person who sacrificed himself to make him see the world from another perspective. However, hours later, Momo receives a call informing him that the ritual went somewhat well, because at least the two of them are alive again, but that due to certain matters, the protagonist will have to be away for a while, since like most of his friends he feared, Now he must deal with the fact that Yakou will gradually consume his soul, and that after a while, there will be no trace of what this young man once was with the hope of seeing a Tokyo free of crows.